Hello there, welcome to Secondcivilwar Productions. I'm Crown Gray's Cocon. Let's get into the video. And in today's video, we're going to be continuing our, this is our third part of our series looking at Trump versus Biden. And after speaking to some of my friends who are not as big brain on politics as me, I kind of realised that actually I kind of was talking past people in a sense, like because I think they said that they really enjoyed the videos, but that because they hadn't studied the US Constitution and didn't understand how their system of government works, that a lot of the points they were like, well, I wasn't really keeping up with kind of all the things we were saying. So we're gonna go right from the very beginning. We're going to look through the US Constitution, not every single part of it, but we're going to look at it with how it pertains to the power of the president, and also we're going to give a bit of an update in terms of what's happening in America so far as of time of recording, and also to look back at what influenced the American founding fathers in the first place to write the Constitution in the way that they did. To do this, we have to bear in mind the old kind of saying of those who refuse to learn the lessons of history are doomed to repeat it. We're going to look at comparisons between the current the current American Republic and the Roman Republic. So at the time of recording this year, which is pretty much the day before this gets released, at the current time it's a thing of they're still counting the votes for the election, which is really annoying. Why is it taking so long for you guys to vote? It's like most states now it's down to 99%. You've already done the hard bit. You've already done 99%. What's the problem with this last 1%? Is it that hard to count still? Because I can still fly over if you need it, the time it's taking you guys to count, I could have flown over to America and counted in every single one of the states that still need doing, and then be back in time. And it still would be quicker than what you guys are doing. Your system is really, really inefficient. I just want to say that. And I know it's all this postal voting and stuff, etc., etc. And I know different states have got different legislation with regard to some of them wanting to delay things, some of them, etc. It's a mess, Like you guys need some sort of, if not federal law, some sort of consensus of we need to count the vote within a certain amount of time, or we just need to get better at counting. I don't know what you guys need to do something, because this system is incredibly inefficient. But anyway, that rant aside again. So Donald Trump is still pushing for legal cases in all the different swing states. Interestingly though, I'm trying to obviously I'm not being partisan. I'm not going to say who I support and who I don't support in this year. I think within the context of this conversation, it's largely irrelevant. So I don't want a bunch of people from either side being like rah, because you're kind of missing the point. This is talking about the continued existence of the American Republic and stuff, right? And talking about following precedents, So someone like Ronald Reagan or George Bush or whatever would never have done some of these things, for instance. And typically, there hasn't been any Democratic president up to this point who would have acted in a similar way. So it is unprecedented times, regardless of your opinion on Trump, whether you like him, you dislike him, you like his policy, dislike his policy. Within the context of this, what he's doing here, and kind of throwing a spanner in the works of the Constitution and stuff, that is unprecedented. Whether you think that it's valid or not, you can't argue that it is unprecedented, and that actually this is something which is very likely a destabilizing force on the American Constitution and a destabilizing force on the American system, which already, as we've seen, is not the most stable to begin with. What's interesting though about a lot of the votes that he's trying to look into is all the states that he's clearly won, he's not putting legal questioning into. So there is a question about how much of the voter fraud is a concern for political reason, how much of it is on a principled level. And in the same way, if it had gone to the Democrats, we know that we would have heard the same thing, because we really saw this 4 years ago, with the Hillary campaign being oh, it's Russian operatives, etc., etc. The thing is, with all these votes, when you start to question the legitimacy of the vote, this is what you end up with, you've set a precedent, And I think that actually there's strong argument to be made that in 2016, this precedent was already set by kind of delegitimizing the election of Donald Trump, if you go into the thing and if you go into a game and you have to agree to the rules, like I said last time, if the rules are as such, you have to abide by the rules, right? If you are happy with states to vote, to count their postal votes at a later point, you can't really be surprised when like the opposition's one suddenly goes up, especially when you've told people not to postally vote. Yeah, you don't have too much of a leg to stand on, yeah, and also the level of voter fraud that would need to be done at the point of recording here, for it to be enough votes to swing the election, it would be a grand total of about 90,000 votes in 4 different states in 4 different corners of the country, all at the same time conspiring to do this, yeah, at a time when the polls were all saying that all these states were many points ahead, because obviously, as we've seen nationwide, yeah, the polls on average were off by about 3 to 4%. The Democrats had no reason to suspect some of these states were swing states. So why would they put all this effort into trying to rig an election for something that they thought they were already going to win? But anyway, another thing that's now unprecedented is the question of, does Donald Trump accept whether he's lost? And there's lots of questions about, is he going to step down, is he not going to step down? And, within the context of this, we're going to explain in this video what the president can do and what the president can't do. But before we do that, we're going to have to look into some of the opinion polls at the moment. So hopefully on screen now, you should be seeing Democratic voters and the country kind of as a whole. So this snap poll by YouGov was taken just after the election, right? And it said, should Trump step down or should he not step down? And then also the other one where it's talking about, are the votes like legitimate or or was there some sort of rigging and stuff? The worrying thing is that you're seeing big numbers, yeah, like 79% of Republicans questioning these things and basically saying like he shouldn't step down, it was a legitimate thing, etc., right? This is quite worrying because this trend, I know a similar thing happened in the last one. Why does the light keep going off now? Whatever. I know that this happened in the last one, right? Yeah, where people lose elections, yeah, like the losing side tends to just be like, okay, it's fine, yeah, like kind of, we've lost, like kind of, yeah. We don't tend to find vast majorities of people like saying, no, the vote was rigged, and it was rigged so much that actually had it not been rigged, our side would have won. It seems pretty unlikely at this point that would have happened. Yeah, I don't really see how that could have happened. Yeah, not to say, so there have been US elections in the past where there seems to have been evidence of some sort of rigging, like famously the 1961 between Nixon and Kennedy, where Kennedy ended up narrowly winning. If you watch the film The Irishman, like you can see that there's implications that the mob was involved in that. Although like the jury's not fully out on that, so yeah, and there have been other times in US like presidential races where it's been really close, and it does seem there's been some shenanigans and such, right? The point is though, for it to have been on that level across that many states, most of those times it's been over like 1, maybe 2 states in like one like region or so, right? And it's the age of the internet and stuff, and I know that like people do have a lot of power and influence, but it's questionable, right, as to how likely it was that it was actually rigged. But more importantly, if your side lost, you need to accept that your side lost and bear in mind like, oh, next time we'll win, right? You can't be like, no, he shouldn't step down, because that sets dangerous precedents. Now, we're going to get into in a second whether he has a choice in the matter, or whether he's stepping down or not. But the fact that people are going, no, he shouldn't, yeah, that's worrying. So you might ask, why did the founding fathers set up America in the way that they did? After they won their war of independence, or the American Revolution as such, there was a big question as to what sort of government America could have. Because obviously they had the pick of the mix, right? They had just come from having a monarch, King George, right? A lot of the arguments for the revolution, especially those advanced by people like Thomas Paine, like who we spoke about in previous videos, so definitely check those out. He argued against the very idea of monarchy and stuff, right? So there was big kind of Republican fervor, like kind of for there not to be a king of America, right? And George Washington actually could have been a king, right? Because he was a very popular general during the war. He was respected and loved by like all people. He was like non-factional, etc. So when it was offered to him, like kind of like he could have, if he wanted to, he could have become king. At the same time, he turned it down, and instead he ended up being voted unanimously, and he ended up being voted in as the first president of the United States, right? And George Washington also set a lot of precedents because he recognized that American presidents would always look to him as the first one for how to act during office, right? But before all this was kind of came to pass in terms of him actually being the president, it was a thing of the founding fathers needed to construct a constitution and stuff, right? So you had the Articles of Confederation, where all the different 13 colony or 13 states at that point, they lived very independently, and this was fine if there was that time of peace and stuff, because it's fine for for South Carolina and for Georgia and for New York and Massachusetts and Virginia to all have their own policies for domestic issues and stuff. But the problem arose when it was time to go to war, right? So if the country was invaded, if there was some sort of major crisis, how could you get these 13 squabbling kind of states to come together, and then also paying off war debts, paying out any sort of thing like road, how do you do this without having a federal government, right? Without having a kind of a central government. And, it took a long amount of time to get this kind of to come together. But there was something called the Shays Rebellion because of taxes being put on whiskey. There was an uprising there, right? And this had to be crushed by the army, led by George Washington. The problem with this is that they kind of thought, actually, we don't have any way of crushing uprising and stuff, and B, we don't have anything for defending against foreign attack and stuff. Now we actually need to come together. We need to actually kind of formulate some ideas, right? Constitutional Convention, and they all came together in the city of Philadelphia. This is where you get the legislature, which is the House, which is the representative, the House of Representatives. This is the representative part of it. This is people voting for quote unquote congressmen, and then you have the Senate, which you have 2 senators for each state, and this would give power to the states. And at that point, up until 1913. Senators were not voted by the people of their states, they were appointed by the state legislature. So the state legislature in all the different states, they sent 2 people to Washington, D.C. to represent them. That covered the legislature, always struggling to say that. And then also you needed to have the Supreme Court, you needed the judiciary, right? To see what was kind of constitutional, what's not constitutional and stuff. Although the power that they had to strike down laws and to say that this law can't run, or making law, interpreting law and stuff, in that way, that was a power that the Supreme Court took upon itself, as we discussed in the previous video. What about the executive? What about the person running the country, right? If America was to have a king, then and this idea was floated. There was an idea of so we already discussed with George Washington and how he turned that down and stuff, But there was the idea floated by Alexander Hamilton for a president for life. So, you'd have someone voted in as president and they would serve for life, right? And if you can imagine how most Americans feel about their respective presidents, imagine, for instance, having, I don't know, George Bush or Obama or any of these kind of people, and obviously some people would like it, some people would really hate it, and a lot of presidents, normally, if you look at their approval ratings after even 6 years, most of them in their final 2 years are very unpopular. A lot of people get very sick of their presidents after a period of 6 years. It was a thing of how do we kind of construct this? And also, more importantly, what powers are we going to give this executive? Are they going to have the power of absolute monarch? Are they going to be able to just do whatever they want, right? Or are they going to have some sort of system whereby it keeps them in kind of under check, right? This is where the whole system of checks and balances came into it, right? The 3 different branches of government, the executive, which is the presidency, the legislature, which is the 2 houses of Congress, and the judiciary, represented by the Supreme Court and the lower courts. These 3 branches, each one keeps the other 2 in check, right? So the judiciary, for instance, has to be appointed by the president and has to be approved by the legislature. The legislature, obviously, whatever laws they are passed, have to be kept in check by the judiciary, and also they can be vetoed by the president, and the president obviously is kept in check by the legislature and by the judiciary, right? This means that the role, if we're going to talk about the role of the president, which people both in America and outside of America have this very overly inflated view of what presidents can and cannot do. And they don't help with their campaign slogans of, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. Actually, the president is not able to pass any laws, right? All laws affecting like money or anything like that has to arise in Congress. The president can do executive orders where he goes, right, we want this to happen, but at the same time Congress can like block, they can block that, and also they can, if it's anything to do with money, it's got if it costs anything to do any of the things, which nearly everything does, it's going to have to be approved by Congress. So the president cannot just he can't just do what he wants. And even the presidential veto power, if 2/3 of the Congress decide that actually we want to overturn that veto, it can be done. The president is limited to a handful of roles in the Constitution, right? He's limited to being the commander-in-chief, right, of the armed forces, although the armed forces do not swear allegiance to him. They swear allegiance to the flag and to the Constitution as such, and to the Republic like in general. He is the head of state, so anytime there's any kind of foreign dignitaries or or anyone, he's the living embodiment of America, right? And I say he because it's always been he historically, but also as well the founding fathers, being forward thinking and enlightenment as they were, didn't really think about the fact that at some point there could possibly be a woman. So when you read the writing for the thing, it always says the president, he will do this, he will do that. So it didn't even occur to these learned gentlemen that that women could at any point in history of the Republic somehow end up getting to the point where they'd be president, which is shows that even the wisest people at that time didn't know everything. And in that regard, the Constitution is rigid enough to keep things in check, so that people can't do anything too radical. At the same time, it's just about flexible enough for it to evolve over time. But there are certain things that need ironing out still. And the president also, like we said, he can veto different laws and stuff, and he can propose law, he can speak to the people in Congress, from his particular party, or even from the opposition party and stuff, but he has to get specific Congress people, to actually enact those laws and to actually get the ball rolling, and then when it comes up to him, then he obviously allows the bill to go through. So the president has a certain level of power and influence, at the same time, he's not the head of his party, right? He can't just do whatever he wants, right? You vote for your congressman, so you vote for your representative, you vote for your senator, you vote for the state governor, etc., etc. And then you vote obviously through the presidency, which we've explained before with the electoral college. Just because you vote for the president does not mean that Donald Trump is not the head of the Republican Party, Joe Biden is not the head of the Democratic Party, okay? So it's very, very different from how it would be, say, in Britain. So outside of maintaining global representation and stuff, and as this is the head of state, this is the head of the armed forces, this is the face of America that we want to have in front of us for the next 4 years, there's not actually that much that the president can do, right? So oftentimes people kind of go, oh my God, the Trump presidency, Biden presidency, it doesn't really matter. And as things currently stand, it's a thing where Joe Biden is likely to have won the presidency, the Democrats are likely to have won the House of Representatives, and the Republicans are maintaining their lead in the Senate, right? So any law that gets passed is going to have to go through the House of Representatives, it's going to get blocked by the Senate, and then even if it were to, it'd have to go up to Joe Biden, etc., etc. There's checks and balances, you can't just do whatever they like and stuff, things can be held up. Even with Joe Biden being in now, people are talking about 62% for the taxes and talking about all this kind of stuff, Very little of what is on Joe Biden's policy can be done without there having to be a lot of compromises that suit the Republicans in the Senate. That's just a reality. They're not going to be able to just put through policies in the same way Trump wanted to build a wall. He couldn't just build that wall. The legislature stopped him from doing that, right? So there's checks and balances for these sort of things. Now, when the founding fathers were putting together the Constitution, they recognized that they recognised that there'd be certain things in there that some people would not want to have, right? There was a big debate at the time between the Federalists, people who wanted there to be a constitution, they wanted there to be a federal United States, so like a more centralised kind of like government and stuff, versus the anti-federalists who wanted the states to be completely sovereign, right? And in the Federalist Papers, with people like James Madison and Hamilton, and my brain just like forgotten like the other one, John Jay. I believe it's John Jay. I should know this, but the main ones are we're going to talk about Hamilton and Madison, right? When they were making their arguments and stuff, right? They gave a whole bunch of reasons as to why America, it would benefit the different states to pull their resources together, to come together, to unify, and that way America will be stronger and better able to defend itself from all threats, both internally and both foreign and domestic, like threats and stuff, right? But as somewhat of a compromise to the anti-federalists, they put in the amendments, right? So this is the first 10 amendments, are what's referred to as a Bill of Rights, and this is ones where it says about Congress shall make no law restricting the freedom of speech, like freedom of press, religion, all the kind of things, right? The right to bear arms, to not have cruel or unusual punishment, the right to the fair trial, the right to silence and stuff, all these kind of things, like basic kind of like liberties that people have. These things, and obviously many more. We don't have time to go through them all now, but after the first 10 bills were put in, it was also open for if people wanted to put in other amendments, right? So in America, there's two ways you can amend the Constitution. You need 2/3 of both the House and the Senate, and then you need 3/4 of the states, or you need to have 2/3 of the states doing a convention, and then 3/4 of the legislatures in those states passing that kind of thing, and that's how you end up having an amendment. And so far, every single amendment that has come to the U.S. Constitution has always gone through the route, whatever. I almost said the route, the route, whatever. I end up copying Americans sometimes when I say things, whatever. So I'm going to say the route, because I know it triggers some of my friends, right? So far, the route that people have always taken to that has always been the 2/3 in the House and the Senate, and then the 3/4 of the state, which is quite strange because it, on the face of it, like, especially given the amount of political polarization there is, one would assume that it'd be easier to just go through the states, I don't know why there's not so far been an amendment like. There's been 27 amendments. Every single one of them has gone through the congressional route, which seems very, very odd to me, especially as it has to go through the states anyway. But it's just whatever. It doesn't make sense. If you've already got 2/3 of the states, one would imagine you could then get the other, If it doesn't really make much sense to me at all. So now with those different amendments, many of them kept checks and balances on the different branches of government in a way that the original founding fathers had overlooked, right? So there's certain loopholes, there's certain things that needed ironing out, and this is why they allowed there to be this kind of amendment system. So we have the 12th Amendment, we have the 20th Amendment, we have the 22nd Amendment, and we have the 25th Amendment, right? So on screen now, so obviously if you want to pause the video and read through them, then it should be on screen and you should be able to go through it. If I've remembered correctly. The 20th Amendment, this is the one that's related to the current affairs that we're dealing with now. But basically the gist is that on January the 20th, at noon, the President and the Vice President stopped being President and Vice President. So Donald Trump and Mike Pence ceased to hold the office of presidency and vice presidency. And then the new president is sworn in, right? So pretty much a minute after noon, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be sworn in, right? So there's no debate about this in terms of, on a constitutional level, there's no debate about, is he going to be able to... And also as well, the fact that many of the states where Trump put lawsuits in, have already rejected these calls of voter fraud. So even he'd need to there to be a recount in all of the different states stuff, for him to actually be all the different swing states, and as many of them have really turned him down, it's like, well, you're just not going to get the numbers up, mate. Even if there was some crazy vote count, some crazy recount, it's not really going to like change anything. And as we said as well, the electoral college are going to come together on December the 9th. So unless the electoral college decide to throw a complete like spanner in the works and just go, right, we're just going to go against that kind of what the popular vote was and what the electoral college that kind of vote was, and we're just going to be like, right, we want Donald Trump to be president again, bar some kind of crazy democratic, because like I said before, it's not constitutional crisis, bar some kind of mad democratic crisis, that is going to happen, right? Joe Biden is going to be the next president, come what may. So if that's the case, that means that, and yeah, I'll really look through the US Constitution, and like, please in the comment section, like kind of like, hit me up. If you can find any loophole in the Constitution for any sort of thing, for any way in which like a dictator or just a stubborn president or anyone could conceivably within the Constitution find a loophole for staying in power longer than they're meant to or whatever, like, because like say for instance the 22nd Amendment, that restricts presidents like to only like serve 2 terms, right? So absolute maximum is 10 years within the thing, right? For the most part it's 8 years, because like it'd only be 10 years if it's a little bit of like you're the vice president, whatever, like it's complicated. But so there's not really much chance of someone staying in office and basically doing a Putin. There's none of that. That begs the question: is there unconstitutional ways that we might imagine that this could be like done? Before doing that, let's actually think, constitutionally speaking, is anything that could be done. So this is the levels of hurdles it would take for, say, imagine I'm not comparing any candidate to to this at all, but imagine there was like a Hitler type person, who wanted to rise to power and completely overthrow things, right? These are the steps that they'd have to go through, right? If someone wanted to be a dictator in America, they'd have to, like I said, win at least 2/3 of both the House and the Senate. They then have to try and pack the Supreme Court or wait for a bunch of people to either resign or die, basically, right? Because they have tenure, they have a job for life if they wish. Then they'd have to have, like I said, 3/4 of all the states. And only then would they then be able to pass a law. Say, for instance, they had an amendment, like a 28th Amendment, for instance, and said they wanted to overturn all the checks and balances on the president within the thing, and basically made someone like a president for life or whatever. That's the level that they have to go through all of that, just for it to be somewhat seen as constitutional. And even then, the chances of that happening are almost nil, right? And for good reason. This is why the founding fathers set up the Constitution in this way, to make it like almost impossible for this to happen, right? And then on top of that, you still got the fact of the Second Amendment. The founding fathers made the Second Amendment because they just fought a war with Britain, and how did they win that war? They won that because people had the right to bear arms. So there's a tyrannical government, people rose up against it, right? Now, in theory, if there's a tyrannical government in America, there's 300 million guns in America, and 1/3 of the population have guns. That's almost 100 million gun owners, with on average 3 guns per owner. They have plenty of training. They have access to military-grade weapons, in most states. Considering that the US Army is only made up of about 2.5 million active troops. Sorry, actually 1.5 rather. It wouldn't take very much. If you had a force of even like 500,000 men and stuff, right? That's going to be quite a difficult kind of thing to repress. But let's look into that. Let's look into the different states and the different statistics on it. So as you can see from the map which is hopefully on screen now, we can see the percentage of each state's population which own guns, right? And as you can see, there's quite a big correlation between the states which happen to vote Republican and the states which have the highest proportion of guns. In some cases, look, as you can see, it's over 50%. It's at very least 40% in a lot of different places. All the states that have relatively low percentage of gun ownership tend to be the more liberal ones on the coast, right? So, say for instance, what we floated the idea of before in terms of it being a second civil war in America, it seems that the ball is very much in the conservative court, right? Not wishing this on America, not saying that this will happen, not saying that Trump supporters will kind of like go up in arms and do this stuff, yeah. But from the stats we looked at the very beginning, with a high percentage of people saying that it's like the vote is rigged and that Donald Trump should stay on as president, yeah, I'd expect those figures to be like 50, like more around 50%, not around like the kind of almost 80% mark. So if even half of those people were fully through like Trump is not stepping down, then that's quite a big percentage of people in the country who could potentially be up in arms, and these people tend to be very well armed as well. Just before filming this, actually, I'll explain the premise of this video, and my dad was like, "Well, I don't really see how that would really happen. You know, the establishment would be against it, the army would be against it, etc., etc." And I was like, "Well, okay, think about this. 1860, yeah, 1861." Before Abe Lincoln, just on Abe Lincoln winning the election, yeah, and before he was even sworn into office, you already had 7 southern states rise up against him, right? And break away from the Union. In 1775, 1776, yeah, what happened in those years, right? A seemingly inconsequential revolt about taxes on tea, like a 3% tax on tea or something really trivial like that. That sparked a shot heard around the world, as they say. And who would have thought that the birth of the greatest nation that the world's ever seen was going to be started over some shots fired in Lexington and Concord, right? So there's no way of knowing how things can pop off, and there's already been political violence already, yeah, like during these last few years, and cities in America all up in flames. You got people, you got militias who are coming out who are and you'd be very surprised how quickly something can spark off, right? Assassination of an archduke, yeah, in Sarajevo, Bosnia, yeah, led to World War One, which in turn led to World War Two, which in turn led to the Cold War, which in turn led to everything that happened over the next century, right? So all it takes is for one shot to be fired and it can change the whole course of world history. And I don't want this to happen. I really, really don't want this to happen, because it's obviously what happens to America is going to affect the whole rest of the world. And actually, in one of the alternative history videos we're going to do at some point, we're going to speculate what would happen if there was to be a major civil war in America, and how the rest of the world would react, what would happen to America itself as a consequence of that. What I personally think, based on everything I've seen, is the most likely thing to happen. So definitely kind of stay tuned for that. That will be coming out within the next few months or so, right? It's a potentially worrying time. I don't want to be alarmist, and I don't want to kind of scare people and stuff, but there's a lot of parallels here between what is happening in today's American Republic and what happened in the ancient Roman Republic, which we're going to get into now. But before we do any of that, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Yeah, I even forgot to do one of these adverts in the last one, but definitely stay tuned for this year, right? If you've enjoyed this episode, and if you definitely check out part 1 and part 2 of this, and then check out all the rest of my videos, yeah, all of them. Especially go through the ones which don't have many views. It's not the reason it doesn't have many views is because up until very, very recently, I didn't actually know about tagging videos. So videos would come out and I'd be like, why is only 10, 15 people actually watch the thing, yeah, right? And then it was oh, I'm not tagging videos. So as soon as I started tagging videos, yeah, you can see the view thing going up. We'll get into this in another video that's coming out on Thursday, which will be the 3-month celebration of the launch of this channel. So definitely stay tuned for that. But it's a thing of really get into this and stuff. Yeah, we're really starting to pick up steam with this channel. We're starting to really get somewhere. Within the space of this last month, it's really been popping off. And yeah, we're going to cover some more great content like this. And yeah, as time goes on, it's going to build, it's going to grow into more and more things, we're going to cover more and more areas. You know, I'm getting different people like hitting me up with like different suggestions for things, being like, oh, can I do this for you? Kind of like etc, etc. So really loving the support, really loving the enthusiasm. Like it's nice when both friends and even complete strangers are hitting me up and saying, wow, what you're doing is really, really good. Keep up the good work. Yeah, it's really encouraging. Yeah, so really appreciate that. Anyway, back to the video. Right, so now we're going to talk about the fall of the Roman Republic. The American founding fathers, as we said, looked to different forms of government, yeah, across the world throughout the great expanse of world history, and they looked at, for instance, the Athenian democracy, which we covered in the history of democracy video, right? So definitely check that out. As we said in the last video, yeah, James Madison famously said that democracies have been short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths. The American founding fathers wanted the American system to last for many, many centuries, yeah, and they didn't want something which was going to last for maybe 100 years and then like spiral into anarchy, right? Because when a democracy fails, yeah, it will go into anarchy and then there will be tyranny that rises up from it. They looked at the oldest system and lasted the longest amount of time, and they thought actually the Spartan system, yeah, like which actually I got wrong in one of the previous videos by saying that Sparta, like in my head, like I believe in like the fascism like video. I said, so definitely check that out, yeah. But like bear in mind that I got that slightly wrong. So I said in that Sparta was basically a dictatorship. This wasn't necessarily true. So the king in time of war could take on like an immense amount of power and stuff, yeah, but only with regard to kind of like how to actually wage that war and stuff, right? You had, for all intents and purposes, a republican-ish kind of system, right? So there was checks and balances on the power of the king and stuff, and actually there was two kings in Sparta, one from one line of family and one from another like line of families, right? And so there was this balancing act. The ancient Romans, yeah, in 509 BC, they overthrew their king, right? Because like their king was very corrupt, etc., etc. And they looked to, because they're very influenced by Greek culture, they looked at Sparta and thought actually that's a better model to go down. So this is where you had the two consuls, right? So these are basically the two executives, the two like kings or presidents, kind of like modern terms, and you know. With these two, there was this constant like balancing of power, right? And each of them could only serve for a number of years before they had to be like before new ones could be chosen, etc. And there's a 10-year gap between if you were consul then, like you'd have to wait 10 years before you could have a chance of being consul again, right? You also had the other different kind of branches of government, at a lower level, like you had like kind of the Senate, which is basically the aristocracy of Rome, the nobility of Rome, and they couldn't like pass laws as such, but at the same time they were like heavily involved in the lawmaking process and stuff. And also as well, like I said, like the plebeians, yeah, the people of Rome, they also had a say in like how things could be done at election time, right? So with that system there lasted for almost 500 years, and for the first 400 years of that system, there was no like serious political violence or instability in Rome. So if you think about it, America's lasted for 244 years, right? Since the Declaration of Independence, and their constitution has lasted for just over like something around the region of like 230. If it's lasted for this amount of time, and we're really starting to see problems, yeah, that's in comparison to the Roman Republic, which lasted for a lot longer than that without any of these issues. What caused a breakdown of the Roman Republic? Much in the same way as we're seeing with America now. The Republic, for all intents and purposes, yeah, while it said it didn't want a king, while it said it didn't want an emperor, it was becoming an empire, right? It was expanding more and more. And we've seen this with America, obviously, yeah. Like the American empire as such, yeah, like it didn't have, like, it had some minor colonies, but it's more just in terms of the military and economic and power projection, that the United States has across the world, right? And most countries in the world are within its sphere of influence. And at a time when I was growing up, America was the global hegemon, like unquestioned. Yeah, China hadn't risen yet. Russia had just like collapsed, like kind of like the fall of the Soviet Union. So it was unrivaled. It could do whatever it wanted. Yeah, it was Pax Americana, as they said. Yeah, like the American peace. Yeah, like, and in this time, there was like more global stability. There was a rise of democracy, like the rise of living standards, less wars, everything like kind of like. So it wasn't like perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it was preferable, I would argue, than the system that it had been before. At the same time, having one state having that much power is corrupting both for those nations which fall outside its sphere of influence and for those which are within its sphere of influence, and most importantly, for the host nation itself. So America became very like its military power, like the power of the president, the power of its government, went far beyond anything that the founding fathers could ever have imagined, nor ever would have imagined. Right? The Washington D.C., yeah, the Pentagon, like the CIA, all these kind of things. The power that it wields around the world and within America itself is extraordinary in comparison to what the founders would have imagined. Much in the same way with the Roman Republic, when it was just a few little bits of territory on the Mediterranean coast of Italy, it didn't really matter so much. But when you start to conquer more and more land, become more and more powerful, and the economy grows and people become wealthy, etc., it ends up being a thing of income inequality sharply rose in Rome, and income inequality sharply rose in America. And for the plebeians, yeah, like kind of ancient Rome, much as the kind of the left behind, like kind of in America, right? There ends up being a lot of like discontent, ends up being a lot of anger and a lot of frustration. Like, well, the game's clearly rigged. There's clearly like corruption because there's an element to which people are becoming very wealthy through their own means and through legitimate means, and that's good for them and stuff. Yeah. At the same time, the economic prosperity is not shared for all. Wages are stagnated. In some places, they've gone down in real terms. Life expectancy for the first time in all of America's history is starting to decline amongst certain groups. And yeah, like certain towns are now like were once like booming like in industrial like kind of heartlands, yeah, and now become like the Rust Belt, have now become like waste places. They've become like kind of like ghost towns, right? If you don't have a share in the system, if you don't feel like you have a stake in the system, yeah, what incentive do you have to really preserve that system, right? If it's a rotten system, what incentive do you, the people, have to preserve that system, which clearly isn't working for you, it's clearly working for the elite? In the Roman Republic, you had the Gracius twins, right? And these two were instrumental in trying to redistribute land, yeah, for the people of Rome, yeah. Like think of them like Bernie Sanders or whatever, kind of, right? Or like like this kind of like share the wealth kind of thing, right? And both of these brothers, yeah, like were assassinated, yeah, one a few years before the other, and very violently and very publicly and stuff, because they challenged like the order of the day and stuff, right? And they challenged the elites, right? But the problem with this is, beside the fact of like, yeah, murdering people for political reasons, yeah, especially for some shady stuff like that is not on, obviously, yeah. Setting that precedence of like political violence, not to say there's not been political violence throughout America's history and stuff. You only have to see the assassination of multiple different people to recognise that, right? But it still is a thing of, it sets dangerous precedents for how we deal with issues, right? If key people are being assassinated for holding views which challenge the establishment, then it becomes a very kind of difficult thing, becomes a very kind of shady thing, and people start to then lose faith in that system because they think, well, anytime someone comes forward who's trying to like help us out, yeah, they just get stabbed up. So I said the first 400 years of first 400 years of the Roman Republic, yeah, there was like political stability. There wasn't much war at all. And actually, I have to really thank the YouTube channel Overly Sarcastic Productions. So I'm going to put a link in the description for them, because I really shout out to that channel. There's a whole bunch of like really good history channels and stuff, yeah. But to do some of the research for this later bit, yeah, I watched like their video on the Roman Republic, so definitely check that out. Looking at all that, it's a thing of, they had 400 years of peace and stability and law and order, And then very quickly, you end up having a succession of up to 12 civil wars in the space of just like 100 years. The whole Roman Republic started to become really destabilized, right? You had people rising up, like kind of, you had generals like who'd rise up to power and take dictatorial like kind of like rule. You know, by the time you get to Julius Caesar, the Roman Republic is on its last like kind of legs here, and it's really a really like corrupt system. Yeah, it's really like what Julius Caesar basically does here, like kind of is he basically takes what's left of like the rotten carcass of the thing and then just kind of just like does like he does kind of what he wants with it, yeah, because like the constitution is on there on paper but it's not like respected anymore, right? And so he breaks the law multiple different times. So for instance, like I said before about consuls could only serve a certain amount of time, right? And also as well, if they were a consul, then they would have like kind of immunity, yeah, like legal immunity, meaning like kind of like they couldn't be prosecuted for any crimes. So what Caesar did when it came to the end of his term is he recognised that, oh, generals also are immune from this, right? So he went from being a consul to a general, end up like, you know, doing loads of like wars in like France and stuff, getting glory and getting the support of the military, yeah. And then he came back 10 years later and was like, oh yeah, cool, I want to be consul again, yeah. And it's a thing of the amount of, you know, and he, you know, and like, and he did things like kind of like that populist things, yeah, like kind of to like win out the people and stuff, yeah. Like so he did lots of reforms that like helped ordinary people and distributed like land and stuff, etc., etc. And you know, this made it very unpopular with the establishment. At the same time, his shady kind of movements, yeah, like kind of really delegitimized the Republic. And then there was another like civil war which he was involved in, etc. And after becoming victorious, kind of at the end of that, he ends up being offered the title of dictator for life, right? And at that point there, the senators in Rome just go, hold on, this is the end of the Republic, yeah, like kind of this man is now a dictator for life, okay? This is kind of the only times when someone's been able to be a dictator for any amount of time, it's just been a very temporary thing in extraordinary circumstances. This man is now a dictator for life. For all intents and purposes, he's now the king. So we overthrow a king all these centuries ago, and now we've got this new person who's basically a king. So this is where if you like read or watch Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, this is what you see when you see like the assassination of Julius Caesar, yeah, by Brutus and by the others, yeah. It's to do with this, yes. It's a mixture of jealousy, and it's also a mixture of we need to protect the Republic, yeah, from being overthrown. What ended up happening is Julius Caesar getting killed, but because Julius Caesar's like fan base here was so strong, because he had such a loyal support within the army and within the people of Rome, it meant that even though this last gasp of the Republic as such, yeah, had overthrown this tyrant, it meant that actually his supporters, yeah, like Mark Antony, yeah, they could like take up and Augustus and etc. They could take up the mantle of it, right? So it didn't matter that Caesar was dead, because now you've got a whole bunch of people who are like on the same side as Caesar, yeah, who are coming to avenge him. After that civil war ends up being concluded, this is now the complete fall of the Roman Republic, and this is where you get Augustus. Oh, that actually, there's another civil war after that as well. But you end up having Augustus becoming the emperor, right? Caesar had shown during his time that actually having a strong, like kind of like authoritarian figure was able to like maintain some level of law and order in Rome, was able to get some sort of like things done for the people, was able to actually like effectively govern and stuff. And at this point, the Republic had basically come apart. Parallels between the Roman Republic and the American Republic now should be quite striking and should be quite obvious for quite a lot of people. We're not at the point yet of like the collapse of America as a world power. That's not for many centuries like to come, I don't think, right? It took an extraordinary amount of like bad luck and bad decisions by very incompetent or negligent or just downright like villainous people, yeah, to actually get America to the point where it's like basically a third world country or something, and the whole like thing's just collapsing in itself. At the same time, the republic that America is founding, yeah, is starting to show some serious cracks, and the power of the government, the power of the president, the power, like the disregard for many aspects of the checks and balances, it's a lot of things are starting to come away at the seam. And it wouldn't take very much, I believe, for a charismatic general or a charismatic because like I said in the last video, yeah, the army is very much respected still. The armed forces are very much respected in America. All it would take would be a very charismatic general, just as you had President Jackson, just as you had President Eisenhower. Not saying that either one of them were a dictator yet, but Jackson, if you look into the history of President Jackson, yeah, he had many shaky kind of things that were kind of similar to what I'm talking about, right? If it gets to the point where someone's popular enough and they have the army and they have like kind of the support of the people, etc., they could just do what Caesar did and just completely disregard the constitution, because no one's paying attention to it anyway. If I have to do the XYZ to kind of like to overturn it, well, so be it. Yeah, like people will still support this person, right? It becomes very dangerous at this point, and America is not that far off. It's not impossible to imagine these series of events happening over the next 50 to 100 years, right? We can clearly see some of these things could literally happen within the next 10 years, right? It wouldn't be impossible. No one expected the American Revolution to pop off as it did. No one expected the Civil War to pop off as it did, right? There's a whole bunch of things in history which, if you were sat 5 years before it happened, you could see inklings of it and stuff, but you wouldn't have guessed that things could descend into hell and into chaos, yeah, that quickly. But they can. History has taught us this. So it's something to be very mindful of, to learn the lessons from the fall of the Roman Republic. So in this final bit, we're going to try and look at some of the things of what America could do, potentially, at a fundamental level to try and restore their republic, yeah, and to get back to to get back to some sort of respect for a constitution, what could potentially be done about it. And I know, yes, I'm a British person, so mind my own business and all that stuff is not my place. But I think, looking into some of the things, I think there's cross-party, non-partisan kind of solutions to this problem potentially. Right, so I think there are three things that we have to really think of. I think without some sort of inkling towards this way, I don't really see how we kind of draw back from this, right? The first being, somehow, whether you're left or right, there has to be some sort of way in which we reduce income inequality and get it so that middle class people's wages start to recover from where they were, because for most of the post-war period up until about the mid-1970s, yeah, wages went up with productivity. Around 1975, you see that it's pretty much flatlined in that time. Somehow we're going to have to work out a way, and I'm not going to go into too many details in terms of how I personally think it could be done. The left wing of the political spectrum would say tax the rich, yeah, so it'd be a kind of a top-down kind of thing in terms of taking money from the rich and then distributing it. So other people would say that it needs to be a more bottom-up thing. So it needs to be a thing of how do we increase the wages of people at the bottom? How do we cut the tax burden on people at the bottom? How do we make life easier for the people at the bottom? Because however you do it, whether you take a bit off the top, whether you lift people up from the bottom, that's the only way to really reduce income inequality. And there's going to be a certain level of inequality, right? That's built in with any system, whether it's communism or capitalism. Yeah, people get this very confused. The point is not about having complete equality, right? Because that's unattainable, and no free society can go down that road entirely. And also, as well, as I've said before, the paradox of equality is that it ends up being a thing of some animals are more equal than others, right? In the sense of some it will require a tiny elite of people to decide what is deemed as equal and what's not deemed as equal. So even in a utopian system, there's always going to be flaws with this, right? But having the inequality, the gap between the rich and the poor be so great, at that point there, it really starts to destabilize the system, because people at the top end up becoming very corrupt and make the laws that suit themselves, and people at the bottom go, well, it's a rigged system anyway, so we've got no stake in the system. So capitalism, democracy, whatever, it doesn't really benefit us. Let's overthrow it, right? If people don't feel like they have a stake in something, why are they gonna risk their life and limb to try and uphold it? They're not, right? Somehow that needs to be dealt with, right? The second thing, in my opinion, is this: the expectations that Americans have for their president and for their government in general somehow needs to be addressed. The founding fathers never intended for the president to have this much sway. It shouldn't matter so much who becomes president. The Constitution puts in restrictions and puts limits and checks and balances on the power of the president. At the same time, there probably need to be more. There probably need to be more ways in which a charismatic, strong person cannot simply just come in and offer people like bread and circuses, as the Romans said, and just kind of, just win the people over with just populist things, and rise up. Because all it takes is, you can have someone who's principled doing that, or you could have someone who's a complete charlatan doing that. But regardless, once you go down that road, it's curtains for that civilization. And then the third thing I would say is the federal government in general, it shouldn't have as much power as it does, and the American kind of military should not be as overstretched as it is. I think that Americans really need to think who are their core allies, and I think they need to think from first principles, what is the role of government in general, and they need to think about what is the role of the federal government, like what powers. The 10th Amendment says that all powers not like delegated to the federal government, should go to the people and to the states. And I think whether you're left wing or right wing, I think that there's very strong arguments for that. I think that if California wants to have very high taxes and Texas wants to have very low taxes, I think having the laboratory of democracy as such, in terms of different states try different things, and people go, oh, I like that, oh, that worked in that state, let's try it in this state and stuff, and oh, it didn't really work there, so we've learned our lesson, rather than this kind of blanket thing of trying to put it over all the different states at a time. Because I think that the Federalists, when they were writing their constitution, they lived in a very different time, and they couldn't foresee, with the rise of technology and with interconnectivity and all the rest of it, they couldn't foresee how America was going to end up becoming this. In hindsight, the argument for federalism is not as strong as the founding fathers would have in hindsight. I think if they look back at it, a lot of them would have regretted the way in which they wrote it, and they would have regretted the emphasis they had on building this strong central government. The anti-federalists, with their arguments for greater state right, it's all very well having a strong military and stuff, and a unified military, and some sort of way of collecting all the different taxes and paying down the debts of the nation and stuff, But beyond that, it's a thing of, I don't think that the founders would have really liked the way that the federal government has grown in relation to the states. I think that the states are most of the states are pretty big as it is, right? They're entities within themselves, and I think that them having a lot more power and the federal government having a lot less power would probably be a better balancing act. Although there is the argument, obviously, that having such different systems in different states could help tear the country more and more apart, because going from one state to the next, it becomes more and more varied. At the same time, it allows safety valves. It allows having a one size fits all policy doesn't really work, because different regions and different states and different people want different things, right? And having a system that's more flexible, having a system that focuses more on the states trying different things, rather than federal government, I think works better. And I think state governments are more accountable than federal governments. And I think that this applies not just to America, but to the whole world. I think that having power coming down more and more to people and being more and more accountable, I think is a good thing. And I think that a lot of the problems, a lot of the alienation that people feel, and a lot of the kind of dispossession that people feel, whether they're on the left or the right, I think stems from the fact of people don't feel like they're in control, and they don't feel like they have a stake in the system. And watch out, because if you start going down that road, then everything that you've built is going to collapse. So I think I'd probably be here all day if I was suggesting more things. And like I said, I don't want to become too party political with this. I don't want to be too ideological with this. And let me know what you think in the comment section. If you think that what I'm saying is nonsense, if you think that I've missed things with this, if you think I've got things wrong, please let me know in the comment section. I'd really like to know. As long as it's respectful. Some of the comments in some of the videos, I don't know who, some of them are just YouTubers kind of deleted a bunch of them, but some of them were just complete nonsense. In terms of, I'll just be real. Some of them saying things that a complete opposite of what I was kind of advocating in the video. Some very, very partisan, the world's going to end, blah, blah, blah. They're kind of they're all evil or whatever. Just no. take that nonsense somewhere else. Yeah, this channel is not for that. So yeah, anyway, thank you for listening to me ramble on about the Constitution, and ramble on about like the future like of America and all the rest of it. You know, I'm not an American, but I do appreciate the country, and I do respect like kind of the impact it's had in the world, and I do think that people who want a better alternative to the alternatives, yeah, so the alternatives being authoritarian top-down states where might is right and it doesn't matter what people want and stuff, yeah. I think that being the alternative, I think that America is the best one. Not perfect. It could be a lot better, and I think even most people in America would agree it could be a lot better. But I'm under no illusions that if America collapses under the weight of its divisions and the inability for it to fix some of these problems, yeah, I think that if that happened, I think that the world in general will be a much worse place. So with that being said, don't forget, as I've said, like, comment, subscribe, stay tuned for future videos, and yeah, don't forget to hit us up in the comment section and stuff, and share this with your friends, man. Share this with your friends. And hopefully you learned some things. Hopefully I've straightened some things out for you about the Constitution. I know it was a bit confusing. Stay tuned for next time, and bye.